leader from Console Data and Research Center. Welcome back. In this module 2, section 4, we are going to look at analyzing assumptions and risk. Remember, in section 1, we have looked at mail requirement, where we have looked at solicitation document and asking questions to understand donors and clients' expectation in the project proposal. In section 2, we looked at understanding issues, where we have discussed review of context literature, conduct capture mission, stakeholder analysis, and also problem analysis. In section 3, we have looked at designing approach, where we have looked at use of the problem analysis to develop solution. We've looked at theory of change, conceptual framework, result framework, and also logic framework. Section 4, analyzing assumptions and risk. When we develop any project, we are expecting some result. And for us to achieve this result, we're going to have some assumptions to be in place that things will go as an assumed. And we are also going to have risks, the things that will going to impede the successful achievement of this result that we are planning to gain. Welcome to section 4 of module 2. Analyzing assumptions and risks. So in this section, we are going to have items like introduction and definition of terms, where we are going to be able to define what is risk, what is assumptions, approach to evaluating assumptions and risks. So for us to develop assumptions and risks documentation for proposal or for guiding our project, we have to be able to evaluate these assumptions. So we are going to look at how can we come up with assumptions and risk. Then importantly, we are going to have risk monitoring framework in what we call risk matrix. So in risk matrix, we are going to look for the indicators of the risk. We're going to look at the data sources for the indicators. We are going to look at the approaches in mitigating these risks, and also we are going to see who will be responsible for each of these risks that we are working on. Strategies for mitigating risks. So we are going to look at the strategies, what strategies to be put in place, and how do we develop these strategies in our project design. Then finally, of course, we are going to have section assessment. All right, so let's look at the introduction and definition of terms. It is important for the project design team to identify risk and assumptions for each output, outcome, and impact. So as I've already mentioned, for you to able to achieve a result, you're going to have some assumptions which you believe to be held, and also you're going to have a risk which can block the achievement or bottleneck which impede the achievement of your result. Okay, how do you develop this? Where are the assumptions and where are the risks? So for you to get this, you are going to look at social, political, economical, and international context of this project. So you are looking at something like, is there potential conflict for this project? What other donors funded project are doing? Is there upcoming election, for example, that might interrupt your project? Are there result constrained by the capacity and resources of local partners? If you're partnering, for example, with a TVET institution for you to solve maybe unemployment among youths, so you are going to look at the capacity and constraint of these local partners that you're working with. Risks and assumptions are often considered together. So when we deal or of course talk of assumptions, we are also going to talk of risk in our project. But it is important to note their differences. So let's look at the differences or the definition of these two important terms in our project design. Assumptions are factors that we rely on to be held or to be in place for expected result to be achieved successfully. So these are factors that you are considering to be in place. All right, like we might assume that donors fund will be available, or for example, if you're dealing with agricultural produce to improve the life of the farmers, you might have something like agricultural produce price will remain the same or increase. All right, and participation of stakeholders will be strong. For example, if you are planning a training and there will be no one turning up for the training, then the participation of the stakeholders are down. So some assumptions like having the participation of stakeholders are assumptions or key assumptions of your project. Of course, these assumptions can either be internal or outside of the organization. So while defining, evaluating, designing these assumptions, you have to note if they're within the organization or they are outside of the organization. What are risks? Of course, every now and then in business, in society, in everything, you will hear people talking of risk. So what is risk? Risks are factors. They are events that can potentially impede the successful achievement of the result. Everything is about risk. Business, project, everything. Government, politics, everything are about risk. So these are events that potentially impede the successful implementation of our project. So when anything comes in as a barrier in your project, then that is a problem, right? Risk can be fully or partially out of our control. So some risk we can a little bit to some percentage can control, and some risk can be completely out of our control. And risk can either be internal or external, just as we have said. Risk can occur at different level, like at macro level, for example, we might have variation in exchange rate between countries, which can affect the income of our farmers, all right? Or changes in climate can be like flood or can be drought, are macro level risk. At national level, you might have something like laws that are approved to be part of the constitution or part of the rule of the law and regulation of a country, which can affect how you're going to run your project or even conflict. At program level, you might have issues with your retention, recruitment and retention of your staff, all right? And also you might lack participant for the training. So there are a lot of risk that comes in your project, both internally and externally and at different levels. This is risk and assumption. So in our next class, we are going to look at approach to evaluating risk. And the first approach, of course, is now coming up with which risk to be considered, while of course there are many risks. So which risk are we putting in our project? I hope this class is helpful. Thank you and enjoy learning.